The cold barrel of the revolver pressed against Lillian Fairchild's temple made her realize that life in the West was nothing like the dime novels she'd devoured back in Boston. Her stagecoach had been ambushed just outside of Cottonwood Springs, Arizona Territory, in the summer of 1884, and now she faced death at the hands of masked bandits who'd already shot the driver. "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling with the illness that had plagued her for months. The consumption that had driven her west for the dry air now seemed irrelevant as she stared death in the face. "Shut up, lady," the bandit growled. "Hand over them fancy earrings." A gunshot cracked through the air, but Lillian felt no pain. Instead, the bandit beside her crumpled to the ground. Two more shots followed in rapid succession, and the remaining outlaws scattered through the settling dust. A tall figure approached on horseback. The man dismounted in one fluid motion, his spurs jingling as his boots hit the ground. His face was partially obscured by the shadow of his wide-brimmed hat, but his eyes' piercing blue assessed the situation with calm efficiency. "Are you hurt, madam?" he asked, his voice deep but gentle. Lillian shook her head, then promptly contradicted herself by dissolving into a fit of coughing. The stranger frowned, concern evident in his expression. "My name is Marshal Quinn," he said, extending a hand to help her from the overturned stagecoach. "Most folks call me Marsh." "Lillian Fairchild," she managed between coughs. "I'm afraid I'm not making a very good first impression." Marsh's expression softened as he took in her pale complexion and the delicate way she held herself. "Let's get you to town. Dr. Wilson can take a look at you." As he helped her onto his horse, Lillian was acutely aware of his strong hands supporting her weight. In Boston, she had been dismissed as too frail, too delicate for marriage. Her father had sent her west to live with her aunt, partly for her health, partly because her prospects for marriage had dwindled with each passing season. "I'm sorry to be such a burden," she murmured as Marsh mounted behind her, one arm securely around her waist. "You're no burden, Miss Fairchild," he replied, his breath warm against her ear. "Truth be told, you're lighter than my saddlebags." Cottonwood Springs came into view as the sun began its descent behind the mountains. The small town consisted of one main street lined with wooden buildings, a general store, saloon, hotel, and various other establishments necessary for civilization in the harsh territory. Marsh guided his horse directly to a modest building with a sign reading Dr. Wilson, Physician. Before Lillian could protest, he had lifted her down and carried her inside. "What's this, Marsh? Found yourself in trouble again?" asked the gray-haired doctor, looking up from his desk. "Stagecoach robbery. This lady needs looking after," Marsh explained, placing Lillian gently on an examination table. "I'm perfectly capable of walking," Lillian protested, though the effort of speaking triggered another coughing fit. Dr. Wilson approached with a stethoscope. "Let me be the judge of that, young lady." After a thorough examination, the doctor straightened. "Consumption, as I suspect you already know. How long have you had it?" "Nearly a year," Lillian admitted. "My physician in Boston suggested the dry air might help." "He wasn't wrong, doctor," Wilson said. "But you need rest, good food, and time. The journey clearly took more out of you than you expected." Marsh, who had been leaning against the doorframe, spoke up. "Her bags are still with the stagecoach. I'll retrieve them and make arrangements at the hotel." "No need for the hotel," said a voice from the door. A plump woman with kind eyes entered. "You must be Lillian. I'm Alina Jenkins, your aunt's neighbor. She sent me to collect you. I'm sorry I wasn't at the station. We weren't expecting the stage until tomorrow." Relief washed over Lillian. "Is Aunt Patricia well?" "Fit as a fiddle, dear, just couldn't make the trip herself. Her arthritis is giving her trouble." Alina turned to Marsh. "Thank you for looking after her, Mr. Quinn." Marsh tipped his hat. "Just doing my duty, madam." "I'll retrieve Miss Fairchild's belongings and bring them to Mrs. Patterson's house." "That's very kind," Lillian said, meeting his gaze. "I don't know how to thank you for saving my life today." Something flickered in his blue eyes, interest, perhaps, or concern. "No need for thanks." "Welcome to Cottonwood Springs, Miss Fairchild." As he turned to leave, Dr. Wilson called after him. "Marsh, mind you don't forget about Friday. Sarah's been planning this dinner for weeks." Marsh nodded, his expression unreadable, and departed without another word. "Who is he?" Lillian asked once he was gone. Eleanor smiled. "Marshal Quinn, he's our town marshal, keeps the peace around here, been doing it for about 3 years now. Good man, quiet but fair. And who is Sarah?" The question slipped out before Lillian could stop herself. Dr. Wilson chuckled. "My daughter. She's had her eye on Marsh since he first rode into town, but he keeps her at arm's length, says his job's too dangerous for family life." Lillian ignored the unexpected flutter of relief in her chest. After all, what did it matter to her if the handsome marshal was spoken for? She had come west to recover her health, not to find romance. Besides, no man wanted a wife who might wither away before his eyes. The next morning, Lillian awoke in her aunt's spare bedroom, sunlight streaming through lace curtains. The room was simple but comfortable, with a brass bed, a pine dresser, and a small writing desk beneath the window. For the first time in months, she had slept without coughing through the night. Aunt Patricia was exactly as Lillian remembered from childhood visits, brisk, practical, and unexpectedly tender beneath her stern exterior. At 62, she had never married, instead building a successful millinery business that catered to the ladies of Cottonwood Springs and surrounding areas. "I won't have you sitting idle," Aunt Patricia declared over breakfast. "Work is good for the soul, and idle hands do the devil's bidding." "I'm happy to help," Lillian assured her, sipping her tea. "I've always been skilled with a needle." "Good. Because I've more orders than I can manage alone, especially with these hands." She held up her gnarled fingers. "Arthritis is a cruel companion in old age." The bell above the shop door jingled as they finished breakfast, and Aunt Patricia rose to greet her first customer of the day. Lillian followed, smoothing down her simple blue dress. Sarah Wilson stood in the shop, a pretty young woman with golden curls and a determined set to her chin. She smiled when she saw Aunt Patricia, but her expression cooled noticeably upon spotting Lillian. "Good morning, Mrs. Patterson. I've come to check on my hat for Friday's dinner." Her eyes flicked to Lillian. "You must be the niece everyone's talking about, the one Marsh rescued." "Lillian Fairchild," she offered with a polite smile. "And yes, Mr. Quinn was very helpful yesterday." Sarah's laugh held little warmth. "He's always the hero. But then that's his job, isn't it?" Aunt Patricia intervened smoothly. "Your hat is nearly finished, Sarah. Lillian will be helping me complete it today. Would you like to see it?" While her aunt showed Sarah the half-finished hat, Lillian busied herself organizing spools of ribbon. She had no intention of making an enemy on her second day in town, especially not over a man she barely knew. After Sarah left, Aunt Patricia fixed Lillian with a shrewd look. "That girl has set her cap for Marshal Quinn for years. She'll view any woman who speaks to him as competition." "She needn't worry about me," Lillian insisted. "I'm hardly in a position to pursue romance." Aunt Patricia snorted. "Because of your health. Nonsense. The consumption's not as bad as it could be, and the air here will do you good." "It's not just that," Lillian admitted. "Back home, I was considered too frail for marriage, too weak to bear children or manage a household." "Hogwash," her aunt declared. "Eastern men are soft. Out here, we value different strengths. Remember that." Throughout the day, Lillian helped in the shop, pleased to find that the work didn't overtax her strength. By late afternoon, she had completed the intricate beading on Sarah's hat and was working on a simple straw bonnet when the bell jangled again. Marshal Quinn stepped into the shop, removing his hat as he entered. He looked different in the daylight, younger perhaps, though no less imposing. The badge pinned to his vest caught the light. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Patterson," he said, nodding to her aunt. Then his gaze found Lillian. "Miss Fairchild, you're looking better today." Lillian felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Thank you, Marshal, and thank you again for your assistance yesterday." "Just doing my job." He turned to Aunt Patricia. "Mrs. Patterson, I'm investigating the stagecoach robbery. I need to ask your niece some questions if she's feeling up to it." Of course, Aunt Patricia said. Use the sitting room, I'll bring tea. Alone with Marsh in the cozy sitting room, Lillian found herself uncharacteristically nervous. He sat across from her, notebook in hand, his posture relaxed but alert. Can you describe the men who attacked the coach? He asked, pencil poised. Lillian closed her eyes, recalling details. 3 men, all wearing bandanas over their faces. The leader was tall, with a scar visible above his mask here. She traced a line across her right eyebrow. Another had a distinctive gold tooth that flashed when he spoke. The third was smaller, younger, I think. Marsh's eyebrows rose as he noted her observations. You've got a good eye for detail, Miss Fairchild. My father always said I noticed too much, she replied with a small smile. It was considered unladylike to be so observant. Out here, observation can save your life. He studied her for a moment. The doctor said you have consumption. Lillian tensed. Yes, is that relevant to your investigation, Marshal? No, he admitted. Just concerned about your well-being. That was a rough welcome to our town. I'm stronger than I look, she said, lifting her chin. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. I don't doubt it, Miss Fairchild. Their conversation was interrupted by Aunt Patricia bringing tea. As she poured, she fixed Marsh with a stern look. Will you be attending Sarah Wilson's dinner on Friday, Marshal? I expect so, madam, he replied, shifting uncomfortably. Good, Lillian will be there too. I've already accepted Aliner's invitation on her behalf. Lillian nearly choked on her tea. Aunt Patricia, I couldn't possibly. Nonsense. You need to meet people, and the Wilsons set a fine table. Her tone brooked no argument. After Marsh left, Lillian confronted her aunt. Why did you do that? Sarah Wilson clearly doesn't want me there. Aunt Patricia smiled enigmatically. All the more reason to go, my dear. Besides, I saw how the marshal looked at you. He was questioning me about a crime, if that's what you want to believe. Her aunt patted her hand. Wear your green dress on Friday, it brings out your eyes. The next few days passed in a blur of work and rest. Lillian found that the dry air indeed seemed to ease her breathing, and the routine of helping in the shop gave her purpose. She finished. Sarah's had a confection of cream silk adorned with pink roses and several other orders, earning her aunt's grudging praise. You've got a gift, Aunt Patricia admitted. Better than mine, even before the arthritis. By Friday evening, Lillian's nerves were frayed. She had seen Marsh only once more, passing him on the street as she ran an errand. He had tipped his hat and smiled, a brief exchange that nonetheless left her flustered. The green dress, as her aunt had predicted, complemented her eyes and gave some color to her pale complexion. She had gained a little weight since arriving, the combination of good food and easier breathing improving her health noticeably. The Wilsons' home was the largest in town, a 2-story clapboard house with a wide veranda. Dr. Wilson greeted them warmly, while Sarah offered a tight smile, her eyes critically assessing Lillian's appearance. What a lovely dress, Sarah said, her tone suggesting the opposite. How fortunate that consumption hasn't entirely robbed you of your figure. Aunt Patricia bristled, but Lillian laid a restraining hand on her arm. Thank you, and your hat turned out beautifully. The pink roses are perfect with your complexion. Sarah touched the hat self-consciously. Yes, well, Marsh always says he likes me in pink. The dinner party consisted of a dozen of the town's prominent citizens, including the mayor and his wife, the bank manager, and the owner of the general store. Marsh arrived last, apologizing for his tardiness. Had to settle a dispute at the saloon, he explained, taking the empty seat beside Lillian, the only one left, to Sarah's visible displeasure. Throughout dinner, Lillian felt Sarah's gaze boring into her. She tried to focus on her food and on conversing politely with those around her, but she was acutely aware of Marsh's presence beside her. His sleeve occasionally brushed hers as he reached for his glass, and the simple contact sent inexplicable shivers through her. Miss Fairchild, the mayor's wife said during a lull in conversation, I understand you're quite talented with millinery. Perhaps you could advise me on a hat for church this Sunday." Before Lillian could respond, Sarah cut in. "Mrs. Campbell, you should know that Miss Fairchild might not be in town long. Consumption patients often move on quickly, seeking more favorable climates." A hush fell over the table. Dr. Wilson cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Actually," Lillian said with forced calm, "Dr. Wilson believes the climate here is quite suitable. I plan to stay as long as my aunt will have me." Marsh's voice was quiet but carried clearly. "We're fortunate then. Cottonwood Springs could use more people with your observational skills, Miss Fairchild." He proceeded to relate how Lillian's detailed description of the stagecoach robbers had led to their apprehension that very afternoon. They were holed up in an abandoned mine shaft 10 miles north. Thanks to Miss Fairchild's eye for detail, we knew exactly who to look for. The conversation shifted to the robbery, and Lillian sent Marsh a grateful glance. He returned it with a slight smile that made her heart flutter traitorously. After dinner, the party moved to the parlor for coffee. Lillian stepped onto the veranda for a moment of fresh air, finding relief in the cool evening breeze after the stuffiness inside. "Are you feeling unwell?" She turned to find Marsh standing in the doorway, concern etched on his features. "Just needed some air," she assured him. "Sarah's perfume is rather overwhelming," he chuckled, moving to stand beside her at the railing. "I've never cared for it myself." Silence stretched between them, comfortable rather than awkward. Lillian studied the stars, brighter here than they had ever appeared in Boston. "Miss Fairchild, Lillian," Marsh began hesitantly, "I hope Sarah's comments didn't upset you." "They were unkind but not entirely untrue," Lillian replied. "I am ill even if I'm improving." "You're stronger than you know." His voice was low, sincere. "I've seen men twice your size crumble under less pressure than you faced during that robbery." Lillian turned to look at him, finding his gaze already fixed on her face. "Most people see only my frailty. Then they're not looking properly." His hand covered hers on the railing. "Sometimes what others perceive as weakness is actually a different kind of strength." The moment was broken by Sarah's voice calling from inside. "Marsh, Mother's serving dessert." He withdrew his hand reluctantly. "We should go back in." As they returned to the parlor, Lillian caught Aunt Patricia watching them with a knowing smile. Sarah, meanwhile, was practically vibrating with suppressed anger as she thrust a plate of cake at Marsh. The remainder of the evening passed tensely. When Aunt Patricia announced it was time to leave, Marsh immediately offered to escort them home. "That's not necessary," Sarah protested. "It's only 3 blocks. "Nevertheless," he insisted, retrieving his hat, "it's my duty to see ladies safely home." The walk through the quiet streets was pleasant, with Aunt Patricia tactfully falling several paces behind them. "I never properly thanked you," Lillian said softly. "Not just for the rescue, but for making me feel welcome here." Marsh's steps slowed. "You don't need to thank me for treating you like a person deserving of respect, Lillian." The way he said her name made her pulse quicken. "Still, I appreciate it. Not everyone sees past." She gestured vaguely at herself. "Your illness doesn't define you," he said firmly. "Anyone who thinks it does is a fool." They reached Aunt Patricia's house too soon. As they stood at the gate, Marsh seemed reluctant to leave. "Would you?" he began, then stopped, clearing his throat. "That is, I wonder if you might accompany me to church on Sunday." Behind them, Aunt Patricia made a poor show of examining her garden in the moonlight. "I would like that," Lillian replied, unable to keep the smile from her voice. The following weeks brought a gradual transformation in Lillian's life. Her health improved steadily, her coughing fits becoming less frequent. Dr. Wilson pronounced himself pleased with her progress, attributing it to the climate, good nutrition, and with a knowing wink, pleasant company. That pleasant company increasingly included Marshal Quinn. After escorting her to church that first Sunday, to Sarah Wilson's visible dismay, he began finding reasons to stop by the millinery shop. Sometimes he brought news of the town or details about the imprisoned stagecoach robbers awaiting trial. Other times he simply came to talk, sitting in the back room during quiet afternoons, watching Lillian's nimble fingers work with ribbons and feathers. "You create beauty so effortlessly," he remarked one day as she put the finishing touches on a hat. Lillian glanced up, surprised by the admiration in his voice. "It's just a hat, Marsh. It's more than that," he insisted. "It's transformation. You take ordinary things and make them extraordinary." His words warmed her in a way that had nothing to do with the summer heat. As July turned to August, Lillian found herself looking forward to his visits with increasing anticipation. They began taking evening walks when the day's heat had dissipated, strolling through town or sitting on the bench outside the church, talking about everything and nothing. Marsh told her about growing up on a small ranch in Texas, losing his parents to fever when he was 16, and making his way as a cowhand before becoming a lawman. Lillian shared stories of her sheltered Boston upbringing, her love of books, and her dreams of seeing more of the world, dreams she'd thought extinguished by illness. "You'll see it all yet," Marsh assured her. "You're getting stronger every day." It was true. By September, Lillian could walk the length of town without becoming winded. Her complexion had lost its pallid cast, and her dresses needed taking in rather than letting out. Aunt Patricia watched these developments with satisfaction but without comment, though her knowing glances spoke volumes. Not everyone was pleased by Lillian's improving health or her growing closeness with Marsh. Sarah Wilson made her displeasure known through increasingly pointed remarks whenever they crossed paths. The situation came to a head at the town's Harvest Festival in early October. The festival was held in the meadow behind the church, with tables of food, games for children, and a small area cleared for dancing. Lillian wore a new dress she had made herself, a russet-colored creation that complemented the autumn leaves. Marsh found her immediately upon his arrival, his eyes warming at the sight of her. "You look beautiful, Lillian." "Thank you," she replied, suddenly shy under his intense gaze. "You look rather handsome yourself." He did, having traded his usual practical attire for a crisp white shirt and black vest. His badge was still pinned in its accustomed place, as he was technically on duty even during the celebration. "Would you save me a dance?" he asked. Before Lillian could answer, Sarah appeared beside them, resplendent in a pink gown with more frills than function. "Marsh, I've been looking everywhere for you. Father wants to introduce you to his cousin from Phoenix." She practically dragged Marsh away, casting a triumphant glance over her shoulder at Lillian. Rather than letting it upset her, Lillian simply smiled and moved to help Eleanor Jenkins arrange pies on one of the tables. "That girl never gives up," Eleanor remarked, nodding toward Sarah, who was now introducing Marsh to a distinguished-looking older man. "But she's fighting a losing battle, if you ask me." "What do you mean?" Lillian asked, aligning the pies in neat rows. Eleanor chuckled. "My dear, I've known Marshal Quinn for 3 years. I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. Like you're water in the desert." Heat rose to Lillian's cheeks. "We're just friends." "If you say so," Eleanor replied, clearly unconvinced. "But friends don't ride 10 miles to the next town just to find the exact shade of ribbon that matches a lady's eyes." Lillian nearly dropped the pie she was holding. "He did that last week. Ordered it special from Mrs. Abernathy's notion shop in Silver Creek." Eleanor patted her arm. "Just something to consider." The festival continued into the evening, with lanterns strung between trees casting a golden glow over the gathering. When the fiddler struck up a lively tune, couples began to form for dancing. Marsh appeared at Lillian's side as if by magic, extending his hand. "May I have this dance?" he asked, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Lillian hesitated only briefly. "I should warn you, I'm not very practiced, and I might need to rest after one dance." "Then we'll make it count," he promised, leading her to the cleared space. Dancing with Marsh felt like flying. He was surprisingly graceful for such a tall man, guiding her through the steps with gentle pressure at her waist. Lillian found herself laughing as they turned, her earlier concerns about stamina forgotten in the joy of movement. When the music ended, they remained standing close, slightly breathless. Something shifted in Marsh's expression, a decision made, a barrier crossed. "Would you walk with me?" he asked, gesturing toward the quieter area near the creek. They strolled away from the lights and noise, the sounds of the festival fading behind them. The creek burbled softly in the darkness, and overhead, stars blanketed the sky. "Lillian," Marsh began, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant, "these past months have been, I've never." She waited, her heart pounding in her chest. "I'm not good with words," he admitted finally. "Not like you, but I need to say this." He took her hands in his. "When I first met you, I thought you were the most delicate thing I'd ever seen, but I was wrong. You're the strongest person I know." Lillian shook her head. "Marsh, let me finish," he said gently. "You faced death with more courage than hardened men I've known. You rebuilt your life here despite illness and uncertainty. You've shown me that true strength isn't about physical power, it's about facing each day with grace and determination, no matter what challenges it brings." He drew a deep breath. "What others see as frailty in you, I see as strength. The strength to endure, to adapt, to hope, and I love you for it." The words hung in the air between them, shimmering like the stars above. "I love you too," Lillian whispered, the admission both terrifying and liberating. "But Marsh, my health is improving every day," he finished for her. "But even if it wasn't, it wouldn't change how I feel. I don't want to waste any more time, Lillian. Life out here is uncertain for everyone." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object that caught the moonlight. "This was my mother's," he said, holding up a simple gold band. "I've carried it with me since she died, waiting for the right person. I've found her." Lillian stared at the ring, overwhelmed. "Are you asking?" "I'm asking if you'll marry me," Marsh said, his voice steady now. "Not because you need protection or because I feel sorry for you, because neither of those things is true. I'm asking because I love you and I want to build a life with you, whatever that life may hold." Tears filled Lillian's eyes, but they were tears of joy, not sorrow. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I will marry you." Marsh slipped the ring onto her finger, then drew her close, his lips finding hers in a tender kiss that promised a lifetime of tomorrows. They returned to the festival hand in hand, their happiness evident to anyone who looked. Aunt Patricia spotted them immediately, her eyes falling to the ring on Lillian's finger. "Well, it's about time," she declared, pulling Lillian into a rare embrace. "I was beginning to think you two would dance around each other forever." Word spread quickly through the gathering. Most offered congratulations, though Sarah Wilson stormed away in tears, her father following to console her. "Don't worry about Sarah," Alina assured them. "She'll find someone better suited to her, and that ring looks like it was made for your hand, Lillian." Later, as they danced again under the harvest moon, Lillian marveled at the journey that had brought her to this moment. 6 months ago, she had arrived in Cottonwood Springs barely able to stand, viewed as too frail to lead a normal life. Now she was dancing in the arms of the man she loved, planning a future that once seemed impossible. "What are you thinking?" Marsh asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "About how life can change so completely," she replied. "I came west believing my frailty defined me. You showed me it could be a strength instead." Marsh's arms tightened around her. "Your frailty is my strength, Lillian. It reminds me every day that the most precious things in life are often the most delicate and worth protecting at any cost." They were married 2 weeks later in the small church where they had first attended service together. Lillian wore a dress of ivory silk, adorned with lace she had salvaged from her mother's wedding gown. Marsh, resplendent in a new black suit, watched her walk down the aisle with wonder in his eyes. Aunt Patricia, serving as matron of honor, didn't bother to hide her tears. "Your parents would be so proud," she whispered as she adjusted Lillian's veil. "And so am I." The couple exchanged vows before the entire town. Even Sarah Wilson attended, escorted by the bank manager's son, who had been paying her increasingly obvious attention since the festival. "I promise to cherish your strength in whatever form it takes," Marsh vowed, his voice carrying clearly through the church. to stand beside you in sickness and in health, knowing that each day with you is a gift beyond measure." Lillian's response was equally heartfelt. "I promise to walk with you through whatever paths life opens before us, to find strength in your love when my own falters, and to remember always that true courage means facing life together, come what may." As they sealed their vows with a kiss, Lillian knew that the journey west, a journey she had undertaken in desperation, and fear had led her not to an ending, but to a beginning. With Marsh beside her, she faced the future not as a frail woman condemned by illness, but as a woman whose perceived weakness had become her greatest strength. 2 years later, on a crisp autumn morning, Marsh stood on the porch of their small ranch house, watching as Lillian walked from the garden with their infant daughter cradled in her arms. The consumption had never fully disappeared, but with proper care and the dry Arizona air, it had receded to a manageable shadow rather than a looming threat. "Margaret's asleep," Lillian said as she joined him on the porch, referring to their 6-month-old daughter named for Marsh's mother. "The fresh air always soothes her." Marsh wrapped an arm around her shoulders, drawing her close. "Like mother, like daughter," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. Together they gazed out at the land that was now their home, the small but thriving ranch, the garden Lillian had planted, the future they were building day by day. It wasn't the life either of them had envisioned, but it was better than any dream they could have created alone. "I received a letter from Sarah today," Lillian mentioned. "She and Thomas are expecting their first child in spring," Marsh smiled. "That's good news. They seem well matched." "They are," Lillian agreed. "She thanked me, actually. Said if I hadn't stolen you, she never would have noticed Thomas." "You can't steal what was never hers," Marsh pointed out. "My heart was yours from the moment I saw you, too stubborn to die at the hands of stagecoach robbers." Lillian laughed, the sound clear and strong in the morning air. "A rather unromantic beginning, but a perfect one," he countered, turning to face her. "It showed me exactly who you were, a woman whose frailty concealed a core of steel." As Margaret stirred in her arms, Lillian reflected on how far she had come from that terrified young woman on the stagecoach. She had found not just health in the West, but purpose, love, and a strength she never knew she possessed. "What are you thinking about?" Marsh asked, recognizing her thoughtful expression. Lillian smiled up at him, her heart full. "About how sometimes the things we perceive as our greatest weaknesses can become our greatest strengths in the right hands." Marsh's answering kiss was as tender as his love, a silent promise renewed each day that her frailty would always be his strength, and together they could face whatever the future might hold.